If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure the YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address.
I, Roberta McCoy, given faith and stand in unity with the vision of perfecting church of sowing this seed of $1,000 plus $235 and receiving the blessings to come to all that participated.
Now that's only $1,200.
Yes.
Y'all not listening to what I'm saying. If you have 1,000 plus 1,000.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna work on the other 800.
Well, that ain't what I asked you to do. Now listen to me. We're going to do this a couple of ways. Those that have the 1,000 plus 1, that means you're coming with your 1,000 that you're giving, plus you've asked someone else to give. Now you don't have to stop at 1,000, and we're going to deal. So in other words, if you say, Pastor Winans, I'm coming with my 1,000 plus another 3,000, then you'll say that. You understand? And if you didn't get the plus 1, but you maybe came with $250, you're going to come say that this is my 1,000 plus 250. You with me? And we're going to go all the way down. So I need you, in order for this to work, I need you to come when you're called with the offering that you're bringing. If listen to me. If you come and say, here's my 1,000, and you don't have a plus, we're going to have time for that. And I want you to come with joy. I want you to come with excitement, because as you give to God, God gives back to you. Because even before we start, we already have about $150,000 in. I need somebody to give God praise. Lord have mercy.
This video has already been making the rounds, and a lot of people have commented on it. I'm going to be talking true about how egregious this guy's behavior was, but also about what I think is the real problem, and that is when institutions go into decay. Why did the civil rights movement not translate into established power for the black community? It was a revolution, to be sure, with powerful ideas, but as Stephen Kotkin said, after a revolution, it's not the ideas that carry over, it's the institutions. This was certainly the case in both the American and French revolutions. In the 13 colonies, there was already a Congress and business leaders, read plantation owners, so they already had both a governmental and economic structure in place before they declared war on Britain. So after the revolution, that's what took over. But what institutions did we have at the time of the civil rights movement? What institutions did we have that would carry over afterwards? Well, we had what we always had, the church. But as I've explained, and you know full well, the church came to be overwhelmingly important in our community because it was set up that way on the plantations. Back in the day, that's what you had. You would have Massa Charlie and Miss Polly show up so that they could have their trusted slave go ahead and deliver the Sunday sermon, which was meant to keep all the slaves in check. Nat Turner was a preacher before he woke up and started using the scriptures as a blueprint for revolution. Is it any wonder that there's always been this unholy alliance between the preacher men in the community and the white political power structure? That's no accident. So with that understanding, we need to realize why, when you look at the black church today, it's become a dumpster fire. You have Creflo Pimpadollar telling his congregation that he has to have a private jet because the last thing a man of God needs is to have to wait for boarding time like everyone else. So it's not enough that he has millions of dollars, a big fancy mansion, he can fly whenever and wherever he wants without even thinking about the cost. He's so pampered that no, he doesn't even want to be around the very people whose souls he claims to want to save. And you know the worst part? The people who call themselves his congregation refuse to leave that so-called church. That's something that we need to be honest about. Too many black people like to be abused. They like to be disrespected and mistreated. This goes hand in hand with black people choosing such ignorant clowns to be the political leadership. When sorry scumbags like Negro Jim Clyburn can do a fish fry every year and dependably use that to turn out black folks for the vote, that lets you know how low the mentality of many black folks has become, or worse, has always been. That's why you don't see me trying to drag anyone into black empowerment. If you see somebody dying of thirst in the desert, are you going to fight with them to drag them to an oasis? No. And that brings us to the self-declared Bishop Marvin Winans of Detroit's Perfecting Church. He had what he called a day of giving, allegedly to finish the church's new sanctuary and on the side to support some alleged community programs. Anybody know of any programs that his church is actually carrying out? A day of giving indeed. Man, he's not even being subtle about it. And just to make it clear what he wanted and how much, he asked members who were donating $2,000 or more to come to the front first. A woman in his congregation who approached the altar with her child gave him $1,200. Now, an offering of that amount would be welcome in any church, but apparently not in Bishop Marvin Winans' church, because he berated this woman in front of the entire congregation and told her she should have given him $2,000. She was in the wrong line to be only giving $1,200. And yes, I'm sure a lot of you will be saying, well, this woman was doing a little bit too much. She was speechifying and all the rest of it. Yeah, but keep in mind, the pastor didn't have a problem with that. He's the one who's the leader of that particular church, and he didn't seem bothered by all the talking that she was doing until she said how much she was giving. $1,200, then there was a problem. Now, was this really about people supporting the church or about the pastor providing a way for people to get some quickie attention for themselves? Why else would he ask them to come forward in front of everybody, but the big money spenders come first? And then he asked everybody to give their names so that their name would be attached to a particular number. This is playing to people's pride, playing to people's vanity and ego, everything the Bible tells you not to do. What do you think Jesus Christ would have done in this situation? Would he be setting up lines for donations based on how much you're going to give? Would Jesus prioritize the largest donors first, or would he say, God is no respecter of kith nor kin? Would he be scolding or rebuffing anyone based on how much they gave? Would he even be instructing anyone to say how much they gave? Then again, what else would you expect from a church that brags that it got money from Tyler Perry?
I'll tell you now, since y'all happy enough, that since it broke out Monday, we have received one person called and he said, tell my name. He said, because I know God is in this. Tyler Perry said $100,000. Bishop Patrick Wilton, he said, I'm sowing and I have +1. So he and his son-in-law sent $2,000. We have received, I'll get all that over. But why don't you give God praise, folks? What the devil meant for evil, God turn it around.
Now, why would he be making a big deal about who gives to his church? But this is what's going on in the black church these days. They're not just demanding the congregation give them money, they're openly humiliating members of the church for not giving them more. And not one of those people who saw this walked out. In fact, I'll bet that just like Creflo Dollar's congregation, those people are defending this guy. In fact, the woman he rebuked, that's exactly what she did. She defended him. We'll get to that in a minute. But the point is, the whole I am a meek and pious member of the church routine, that started off as a bad joke, now it's just sad. Even in the Bible, the apostles warned that there's a ton of bad churches out there and that you have to be ready and willing to walk away. But in most cases, this falls on deaf ears. People like to be conned. They like to be abused, especially if that abuse comes from someone with the gift of the gab, someone who is gregarious and can easily ingratiate themselves with others. People tend to eat that abuse right up. The Bible says in Job 34:19, God is not partial to princes, nor does he regard the rich more than the poor. Well, pastors like Bishop Winans do. If you got money, they want you at the front of the line. The Bible says not to make a spectacle of yourself when engaged in Christian activities, to do so humbly, quietly. The person who gets put on a pedestal for how much they give to the church, that's not piety. It's avarice by the pastor. Everybody knows that one of the main things that human beings struggle and strive for the most is status. How are they viewed and seen in the eyes of others? Well, in his church, Bishop Winans was pointing out that the way you get status there is based on how much you give. That's a quickie way to get some status in his church. The Bible talks about the widow's mite, and just for the record, mite is spelled M-I-T-E. It means offering in this case. In that biblical story, there was a ceremony taking place at the temple in Jerusalem. When it came time to give offerings, the rich people threw in their big money. Then there was a poor widow. She put in 2 small coins. Jesus said that this poor woman's contribution was worth more than the rich people's offerings because they gave from their own comfortable surplus of wealth. The widow, on the other hand, she gave everything she had. You see, the word sacrifice means to make holy. When you're giving up something, it costs you something. That's how you make it holy. Her offering was holy. Theirs was not, because her offering came from what she didn't have. Theirs, well, that was what they had to spare. And that's how spirituality actually works. That's what gives an offering spiritual value. Now, that was the standard that Jesus Christ himself established. But then again, Jesus wasn't demanding that people give him money so he could get a gold-plated chariot or a custom-made luxury boat, so he could be the fisherman of men's souls in style. He walked practically everywhere he went. When he entered Jerusalem, it wasn't on the back of a white stallion all decked out with fine linen. Instead, he entered Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. He wasn't leading some grand parade either. It was just him and his disciples. A disproportionate amount of Jesus' gospel dealt with him calling out rich people. He threw the money changers out of the temple for conducting commerce in the house of God. But unfortunately, they slithered right back in. And instead of charging people money to convert one currency to another, now they're charging money for some loudmouth heathen to give a sermon and act like a low-rent DJ in a club. Obviously, these are not men of God. They're 2-bit comedians putting on bad comedy, and at best, they're half-baked motivational speakers who only want to motivate you to give them money. The sad part is, the congregation isn't fooled. They're in on the joke. The pastor's a pimp, and they're glad to be pimped out. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, the very woman he humiliated went to the white media and defended him. She said that it wasn't a rebuke, it was correction, because she had gotten into the wrong line.
You're the woman in that viral video.
Right.
He did not rebuke you.
He absolutely did not rebuke me. Now, there's a difference. There was a correction because let me clearly state that Pastor gave instruction on the lines to get into.
You can't make this stuff up. Ever since he began catching flack online, Bishop Winans wanted to make it known that he had apologized to the woman.
I was calling because the whole church was giving, and it was our day of giving, and the whole church was coming, and we didn't want people standing, the mothers and all that, so I was calling them by increments. And we had someone that had given out of before, and I corrected it, and I told everybody to listen and come when you call, and that's all that was.
Roberta told me Pastor Winans personally apologized to her. She's been a member of Perfecting Church since 2013.
Now, why would he do that? After all, he's supposed to be anointed by God. So it wasn't a mere mortal who was rebuking this woman or correcting her, quote unquote. It was God doing so, speaking through his chosen vessel, Bishop Winans, right? So why is he apologizing for merely doing what God prompted him to do? You gotta give Pimp Winans, Bishop Winans his credit. He's running that game something sweet. He's got them wrapped around his pudgy little fingers. I've long told you that Professor Black Truth's definition of an institution is a group of people who come together to protect and promote a particular idea or ideal. Now understand, it's the group of people who are the institution, not the building. When they call a bank an institution, they're actually talking about the organizers of that bank. And the same thing goes for a church. Whenever you look at a building, that's not actually the church itself. The building is the sanctuary. It's the people who are the church. That's the actual church, the members of the church. And that's the reason why when these institutions start to decay, that is not a good thing. They have to be protected by the actual members of the institution. Churches, especially the black church, stopped being a moral institution a long time ago. It's not a place for spiritual guidance and unity. It's just an extension of the world. It makes sense that you have so many people who come there right after they were at the club on Saturday night just a few hours earlier, often wearing the same clothes they had on at the club. The church is not the house of God. Now it's the place to see and be seen, the place to style and profile. Pull up in your new car that you financed but can't afford, in new clothes bought on a credit card that you're about to default on. You'll still tell people that you just want everyone to see how God has blessed you, and just to make sure that your pockets get run, Bishop Winans will tell you to come to the front of the congregation if you got some big money. You can go ahead and get some attention while you hand everything over to him. Yeah, they understand full well that there's some folks who are psychologically anemic, and they will go ahead and give up their last dollar just for a temporary sugar rush to have some people pay them some attention. It's sad, but it's also true. The pastor will tell you that you're obligated to hand over your check to him. Last time somebody was making demands like that of black folks, it was slave owners. If a plantation owner had a slave that they allowed to have a job, like Frederick Douglass, for example, then they would always tell that slave that come payday, you got to hand it all over to massa, and he would decide what, if anything, he would allow you to keep. And then there's the sexual depravity. These pastors are using the church as a place to hit on all the single mothers there who are the majority of the congregation now, and worse, they prey on the children. And then you see how some of these so-called New Age pastors are dressing. Remember what I said about congregants who would go directly from the club to the church wearing the same exact clothes? Well, apparently they're taking their cues from these New Age pastors who are doing the exact same thing. The church has become a whorehouse, literally. There may be a handful of righteous leaders left, but not many. All right, that's the problem. What might be the solution? If the black church is ever going to reclaim its place as a moral institution, then that change must start with the congregation themselves from the very inside. They will have to operate like a place that's pursuing treasure in heaven and not a place that's storing up riches here on earth. The so-called prosperity doctrine is the poison that corrupts the church, and there's nothing new about it. It goes all the way back to the ancient world. In the days of the Old and New Testaments, one of the things that religious leaders would do is to proclaim that God would bless those who were righteous with material rewards. And if you were poor or sick or otherwise unfortunate, well, that's because you had offended God somehow. You got to get right with God if you want some money and you want some good health. So how does one get right with God? Well, fortunately, the men who created the prosperity doctrine, they've got God on speed dial. And if you give money to them, they'll go ahead and give the good word to God himself, and you'll go ahead and be rewarded many times over. But you got to go through them to get it. Hand over your money to prove that you don't worship money. And don't bother to ask the bishop about how he has such fine threads and new car and big fancy place. No, you just worry about making sure that he gets the money that you're supposed to be giving. And just in case all of your prayers and tithing doesn't work, that's okay, because you'll have proven your piety and you'll get your rewards in heaven. Meanwhile, the men who push the prosperity doctrine, they get their rewards right here on earth. For an economically impoverished minority, this doctrine is particularly attractive and dangerous. The prosperity doctrine is very effective at capturing people's imaginations, like people who daydream about winning the lottery. It draws from the exact same psychological place. How many people have given all their money to the casinos, or online gambling, or Powerball? They haven't won, but they just keep on believing. They do it on faith. But faith in what? The problem here is far bigger than a preacher man fleecing the flock. This is about an institution that's become a dumpster fire. His greed makes it where a place that could inspire people has become a place that people avoid. Admittedly, I'm not big on church going, but I am familiar with the three monotheistic religions, and I see the value in all of them as works of theosophy, if nothing else. As Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, you don't need religion, but you do need spirituality. I go for that. We need to be imbued with the sense that what we do and what we are is more than flesh and blood. When people reduce our existence down to nothing more than our corporeal elements and just the physical world around us, then nothing we do matters and nothing we are matters. So yes, I do believe that spirituality is very important. It has real value. But the problem with religion is that's ritual. Ritual without spirituality is a scam. You don't have to be one to hoop and holler in church to be able to appreciate what spirituality can do at its best. But that's not what people like Bishop Winans are doing. Well, it's going to be up to the congregations to decide that they will actually learn from their Bible, and that's what the lesson of Christianity was supposed to be. The Bible is supposed to be the Christian's authority, not whatever man of flesh and blood is standing in front of them. Jesus Christ knew what to do about businessmen and hustlers who were in the house of God. He ran them out. And while it is true that as long as the church is part of the physical world, it is going to need money to run, it's also true that when a pastor calls himself humiliating people based on how much they give for any reason, humiliating people based on money, that's a problem. When someone links the idea of eternal life to how much money you're giving them, that's a powerful motivator, but it's also a powerful manipulator too. And this man isn't taking the gospel to the four corners of the earth. He's right there in Detroit, raking in huge amounts of money and using it for, well, I'm not sure. Yeah, he may have some things that he does in the local community, but how much did you hear about him talking about that? We would be fools to not take into account how he treats his congregation, especially when they're making big donations to him. You shall know them by their fruits, after all. And as much as this man brags about how much money his church raises and from whom, that just doesn't strike me as being very meek. The black church has lost its spiritual legitimacy, and people like this Bishop Winans is a huge part of the reason why. And it falls to the people in those pews to change that by changing where they go. They are the institution, not some box of brick and mortar that they go to once a week, and certainly not Bishop Winans. Until black people rediscover that kind of spiritual courage, the black church will continue to go the way of every other institution that was taken over by charlatans and con men. Straight to hell. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Michael Somners, Morris Bodden, Frederica Moore, Bo McLean, and James Stiles. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.